The cold metal of the wedding ring pinches between my fingers as I roll it back and forth, catching the dim light of Dr. Feldman's office. 5 months since Lena died, bringing our son into the world, and I still can't process a reality where she isn't waiting for me at home. Robert, are you with me? Dr. Feldman's voice pulls me back to the present. His office smells of old books and coffee, comforting in its consistency when everything else in my life has been upended. Sorry, I mumble, slipping the ring back onto my finger. You were saying? I was suggesting that you might consider focusing on Dylan now. Your son needs you present, not just physically but emotionally. He leans forward, his kind eyes searching mine. Grief isn't linear, but there comes a point where we must find a new meaning, a new purpose. I nod, not trusting my voice. Dylan. My son. The miracle that cost me everything. I know, I finally manage. It's just, how do I tell him about his mother when he's old enough to ask? Dr. Feldman's expression softens. You'll find the words when the time comes. Lena lives on in him, in his eyes, his smile. That's not something death can take away. 5 years later. The autumn breeze carries the scent of cinnamon and apples through the cemetery as I stand before Lena's headstone, Dylan's small hand wrapped in mine. He's 5 now, curious, bright, with his mother's thoughtful eyes and determined chin. Is Mommy really under there? He asks, pointing to the granite marker bearing Lena's name. No, buddy, I say, kneeling beside him. Your mom is everywhere, in the sky, in the trees. Most importantly, she's in you. I tap his chest gently. Right here. Dylan considers this with the solemn contemplation only children can truly master. Does she know about my t-ball game? I hit the ball real far. A lump forms in my throat. She knows. Dylan. She'd be so proud. After placing the fresh flowers we brought, I brush my fingers across Lena's name etched in stone. In the years since her passing, I've built Mercer Contracting into one of the most respected names in commercial construction in our region. Success that feels hollow without her to share it. I promise, I whisper, too low for Dylan to hear, I will protect him with everything I have. He will know love, safety, and happiness. I swear it. The charity evening at Dylan's kindergarten buzzes with the controlled chaos of children's laughter and adults making small talk. I adjust my tie, uncomfortable in these social settings without Lena as my buffer, and scan the room for my son. Mr. Mercer. A melodic voice from behind startles me. I turn to find a woman with chestnut hair and penetrating green eyes extending her hand. Her smile reaches all the way to those eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that seems genuine, not practiced. I'm Veronica Hall, Dylan's new teacher. He talks about you constantly, his superhero daddy who builds skyscrapers. Despite myself, I smile. Just office buildings, mostly. Nothing as impressive as wrangling 25-year-olds every day. Oh, I don't know about that. She laughs, the sound warming something long cold within me. Dylan makes it easy. He's incredibly bright, though he's struggling a bit with his math concepts. I frown slightly. He hasn't mentioned having trouble. Boys that age rarely want to admit when something's challenging. Her gaze meets mine directly, holding it with unexpected intensity. He's so determined to make you proud. Before I can respond, a small missile in the form of my son crashes into my legs. Daddy, did you meet my fairy teacher? She lets me have extra time on the puzzle station. Veronica blushes charmingly at the nickname. Fairy teacher. Because you make magic happen, Dylan explains with the unassailable logic of childhood. Like when you fixed Jimmy's crying with invisible magic. That was just a hug and a cookie, sweet boy, she says, ruffling his hair with easy affection. Not magic at all. I watch their interaction, something both warm and uneasy settling in my chest. Dylan hasn't connected this easily with any adult since Lena's mother passed 2 years ago. Mr. Mercer. Robert, please. Robert, she corrects with another smile. Perhaps we could meet for coffee sometime? To discuss Dylan's progress and some strategies to help with his math skills? I have some approaches that might work well with his learning style. I hesitate, caught off guard by both the request and my instinctive desire to accept. It's been so long since I've had a conversation with an adult that wasn't about concrete pouring schedules or building permits. That would be helpful, thank you, I hear myself saying. Later, as Thomas and I review quarterly projections in my home office after Dylan's bedtime, my oldest friend and CFO raises an eyebrow. A coffee date with Dylan's teacher? Moving fast there, Rob. It's not a date, I protest, perhaps too quickly. It's about Dylan's math skills. Thomas gives me a knowing look. Just be careful. She asks a lot of questions about the company. Mary mentioned it after the PTA meeting last week. I shrug off his concern, my mind drifting back to Veronica's eyes, to the way she seemed to truly see Dylan, not just as another child in her class, but as the special boy he is. Not everyone has ulterior motives, I say, surprised by my own defensiveness. Maybe not, Thomas concedes. But the ones who do never advertise it up front. For the first time in 5 years, I fall asleep that night thinking of someone other than Lena or Dylan. It feels both like betrayal and like taking a full breath after years of shallow breathing. Coffee with Veronica turned into dinner. Dinner became weekend outings with Dylan. Before I realized what was happening, she had woven herself into the fabric of our lives with such careful precision that I couldn't pinpoint exactly when she became essential. Daddy, can Miss Veronica come to my baseball game tomorrow? Dylan asks one evening as I tuck him into bed, his room illuminated by the dinosaur nightlight Veronica found at a yard sale. She promised to teach me a special cheer for when I'm up to bat. If she's not busy, I hedge, though I already know she'll be there. She's never too busy for Dylan. She won't be busy, he says with absolute certainty. She told me that we're her favorite people in the whole wide world. I kiss his forehead, inhaling the clean scent of his shampoo. We're pretty lucky to have her in our lives, aren't we? Dylan nods sleepily, clutching the stuffed triceratops Veronica gave him for his half-birthday, a celebration I didn't even know existed until she baked his favorite chocolate chip cookies and decorated our dining room with paper dinosaurs. Later that night, as Veronica and I wash dishes side by side, I catch myself watching the way the kitchen light catches in her hair, creating auburn highlights I've never noticed before. I can feel you staring, she says without looking up, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Sorry, I reply, not sorry at all. Just thinking how natural this feels. She turns to me then, dishwater dripping from her hands onto the tile floor. It should feel natural. Some people just fit together, Robert. Like puzzle pieces designed to connect. The kiss that follows feels inevitable, like the culmination of a story that began the moment she introduced herself at the charity event 8 months ago. Mercer Contracting has been selected for the Millennium Plaza development, I announced to my executive team, unable to keep the pride from my voice. This will be our largest project to date, a mixed-use complex with residential units, office space, and retail. Applause erupts across the conference table. Thomas claps me on the shoulder, his expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. You pulled it off, you magnificent bastard. Later, as I spread the contract documents across my home office desk, Veronica brings me a glass of celebratory whiskey. May I see? She asks, gesturing to the papers. I did minor in business law before switching to education. I hesitate for just a moment before pushing the documents toward her. Sure, though it's pretty standard contract language. Our legal team has already reviewed everything. She scans the papers with surprising focus, occasionally making small humming sounds. The financial structure is fascinating, she comments, lingering over the payment schedule. Have you considered the tax implications of the phased completion bonuses? The question catches me off guard. Thomas handles most of that side of things, I admit. Smart to delegate, she says, but something in her expression changes, so quickly I almost miss it. Disappointment, perhaps? But why would she be disappointed about my company's financial arrangements? The thought dissolves as she sets the documents aside and moves behind me, her hands working the tension from my shoulders. You're going to be amazing with this project. I've never met anyone as capable as you, Robert. Her words wash away my momentary unease. Why would I question the motives of someone who believes in me so completely? 8 months after our first kiss, I proposed to Veronica under the stars at the Millennium Plaza construction site, the skeleton of what will be my greatest professional achievement towering above us. I never thought I'd find love again, I tell her, the diamond ring catching moonlight between us. But you've given both Dylan and me a second chance at family. Tears glimmer in her eyes as she accepts. You have no idea how much this means to me, she whispers, and something in her intensity sends a shiver down my spine, not entirely unpleasant, but not entirely comfortable either. The feeling returns during our engagement dinner when my sister Audrey pulls me aside while Veronica entertains Dylan in the living room. Rob, don't you think this is moving awfully fast? Audrey's concerned expression mirrors our mother's so closely that I have to look away. We barely know anything about her. How long has she even been working at the kindergarten? Where was she before she moved here? She makes Dylan happy, I say defensively. She makes me happy. I know, and I want that for you. I do. Audrey squeezes my arm. But happiness based on half-truths has a way of crumbling when the full truth comes out. I brush off her concerns, choosing to focus instead on Veronica's laughter mixing with Dylan's in the next room, the sound of the family I thought forever lost to me. During wedding preparations, I suggest a prenuptial agreement, explaining its standard practice given my company's financial obligations. Of course, Veronica agrees after a moment of visible tension. I understand completely. Your business has to come first. But something in the way she says it, the slight hardening around her eyes, plants a seed of doubt I'm not yet ready to nurture. When she resigns from the kindergarten after our small wedding, explaining she wants to focus on being a mother to Dylan, I tell myself it's another sign of her commitment to our family. I refuse to acknowledge it might be the first piece of a facade beginning to crack. I first notice something's wrong when Dylan stops running to the door when I come home from work. Instead, I find him quietly playing in his room, shoulders hunched as though trying to make himself smaller, invisible. Hey, buddy, I say, kneeling beside him one evening. Everything okay? He nods without looking up from his Lego spaceship, but his hands tremble slightly. You sure? You've been pretty quiet lately. I'm fine, Daddy, he whispers, still not meeting my eyes. Can I sleep in your room tonight? Of course, but why? Did you have a bad dream? Dylan glances toward his bedroom door, as if checking that we're alone. I just want to. That night, I wake to the warm wetness spreading across the sheets. Dylan's face crumples in shame when I gently wake him. I'm sorry, he sobs. Please don't tell Mom Veronica. Please. Mom Veronica. Not just Veronica anymore. When did that change happen? It's okay, buddy. Accidents happen. I change the sheets while Dylan changes his pajamas, his little body radiating tension. Has this happened before? A hesitant nod. Did you tell Veronica? His eyes widen with fear. She said big boys don't wet the bed. She said only babies do that. Something cold settles in my stomach. This doesn't sound like the warm, nurturing woman who captivated us both. Dylan, does Veronica ever get angry with you when I'm not home? His silence tells me everything. The next day, I schedule an appointment with Emma Chen, the child psychologist who helped Dylan process his grief over never knowing his mother. I make the appointment during my lunch break, not mentioning it to Veronica. After examining Dylan alone, Dr. Chen asks to speak with me privately. Robert, have there been significant changes at home recently? Her carefully neutral expression raises alarm bells. My wife and I married a few months ago. Dylan seemed happy about it. Seemed, she prompts. He's different now. Quieter. He started wetting the bed again. She makes a note. Children are remarkably perceptive, but they often lack the vocabulary to express complex emotional distress. Instead, they show us through behavioral changes. What is he showing us, Dr. Chen? Her eyes meet mine directly. Fear. Robert. Dylan is showing signs of fear. That evening, searching for our insurance documents to submit Dylan's therapy claim, I discover financial statements hidden in Veronica's nightstand drawer. Bank accounts I never knew existed, with substantial transfers from our joint account, money allocated for Dylan's college fund. I wait until after Dylan's asleep to confront her. What's this? I ask, placing the statements on the kitchen counter. She freezes momentarily before her expression melts into wounded innocence. You went through my things. How could you? That's not an answer, Veronica. It was supposed to be a surprise. Her eyes fill with tears. I've been saving for our anniversary trip. I wanted to take you somewhere special to thank you for everything you've given me. The explanation sounds reasonable, but something in her performance feels rehearsed, as if she's been preparing for this confrontation. And the college fund transfers? A temporary loan. The travel agent needed a deposit. She steps closer, placing her hand on my chest. I was going to replace it next month with my personal savings. Don't you trust me, Robert? I want to. God help me, I want to believe her. The next day, Marcus Johnson, head of security for the Millennium Plaza project, calls me into his office. Mr. Mercer, a woman was asking unusual questions yesterday about security protocols, access points to the blueprint room. When our receptionist asked for identification, she said she was your wife. My mouth goes dry. What kind of questions? Technical specifications, mostly. Things civilians wouldn't typically care about. He hesitates. The description matches the photos on your desk, sir. That night, I notice Veronica's phone is locked with a new password. She takes calls in whispered tones, ending them abruptly when I enter the room. Work stuff, she says dismissively when I ask. Just volunteering for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. But Veronica doesn't volunteer anywhere. She hasn't worked since our wedding. I return early from a site visit, hoping to surprise Dylan with tickets to the dinosaur exhibit he's been begging to see. The house is quiet when I enter, but I hear muffled sobbing from upstairs. Following the sound to Dylan's closet, I find him huddled among his shoes, arms wrapped around his knees. Dylan. I crouch beside him, heart pounding. What happened? Why are you hiding? He shakes his head, tears streaming down his flushed cheeks. You can tell me anything, I promise, gathering him into my arms. Anything at all. I can't, he whispers against my shoulder. She said if I tell, she'll send me away from you forever. She said you won't want me anymore. A cold fury unlike anything I've ever experienced washes over me. Who said that, Dylan? His voice is so small I barely hear him. New mom. She gets different when you're not here. That night, after both Veronica and Dylan are asleep, I install hidden cameras in the living room and Dylan's bedroom. As I work, Thomas's warning echoes in my mind. The ones with ulterior motives never advertise it up front. I pray I'm wrong. I pray the cameras reveal nothing but my own paranoia. But in my heart, I already know the truth. I wait until Veronica takes Dylan to his Saturday soccer practice before reviewing the camera footage. My hands shake as I connect the secure drive to my laptop. The first few recordings show nothing unusual. Veronica reading on the couch, talking on the phone about mundane matters, helping Dylan with homework. I begin to feel foolish for my suspicions. Then I see it. As soon as my car pulls out of the driveway, her demeanor transforms. Her soft, nurturing expression hardens into something cold and calculating. She speaks sharply to Dylan, yanking his arm when he doesn't respond quickly enough to her commands. Your father spoils you, she snaps in one recording. In this house, you'll listen to me, or there will be consequences. My stomach churns as I watch Dylan shrink into himself, his eyes downcast. But the worst comes from yesterday's footage. Veronica kneels before my son, her manicured fingers digging into his shoulders. Your real mother didn't want you, that's why she died, she hisses. You think your father really loves you? He only loves his work. You're just a burden he's stuck with. Dylan's silent tears feel like a knife to my heart. The look of pure malice on Veronica's face, a face I've kissed, trusted, makes me physically ill. I close the laptop, unable to watch more. With shaking hands, I dial Thomas. I need help, I say when he answers. And I need you to not say, I told you so. To his credit, Thomas doesn't. Instead, he says, what do you need? Everything you can find on Veronica Hall's background. And the name of a good private investigator. 3 days later, I meet Michael Reyes, a former detective turned private investigator, in a coffee shop across town. Mr. Mercer, he says, sliding into the booth. I've done some preliminary digging into your wife's background. And my coffee sits untouched, my appetite gone since discovering the recordings. Veronica Hall didn't exist until 16 months ago. He pushes a folder toward me. Her real name is Victoria Haynes. She changed it after a court case in Arizona. I flip through the documents, hardly comprehending what I'm seeing. What kind of court case? Divorce. Messy one. Michael's expression is sympathetic but professional. She was married to a real estate developer named Gregory Phillips. When they divorced, she accused him of physical abuse, accusations that were later found to be fabricated. But not before he lost custody of their children and most of his assets. Children. My voice sounds hollow even to my own ears. 2. From his previous marriage. She was their stepmother for less than a year. The similarities to my situation send ice through my veins. What happened to him? Michael hesitates. Phillips couldn't handle losing his kids. He took his own life 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I close my eyes, willing the spinning room to still. You said that was her second marriage? Yes. First husband was a biotech executive in California. Similar pattern, quick courtship, marriage, accusations, financial ruin. He survived, but barely. And before she came here, what was she doing? Working as an administrative assistant at a private school in Nevada. But here's where it gets interesting. Michael taps a photograph in the file. I found a connection between your wife and this man, Preston Walsh. He specializes in what he calls creative investments. The photo shows Veronica, Victoria, dining with a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. They're leaning close, intimate. They've maintained contact through a series of burner phones and encrypted email accounts, Michael continues. I also discovered she's been renting an apartment under her real name about 30 minutes from your home. The betrayal cuts deep, but the revelation of her systematic deception runs deeper. This wasn't passion or a moment of weakness. This was calculated predation. I need you to keep digging, I tell Michael. I need everything you can find on both of them. That evening, while Veronica attends her book club, another lie, I now realize, I access her laptop. Her password is Dylan's birthday, a cruel irony given her treatment of him. I find emails between her and Preston, dozens of them, outlining their scheme in meticulous detail. Target acquired, reads one from shortly after we met. Single father, successful construction company, emotionally vulnerable due to wife's death. The child is the perfect leverage point. Another, from 3 months ago, marriage secured, prenup signed. His attachment to the boy will be his undoing. Once I document the abuse, custody will follow, then the real payday begins. The most recent, sent just yesterday, Millennium Plaza Financials accessed. Wire transfer routes confirmed. Once the dissolution filing is complete and the abuse allegations are on record, we'll move to Phase 3. I forward everything to my email, then to Michael and Thomas. Evidence. I need every piece of evidence I can find. As I'm about to close the laptop, I notice a calendar entry for tomorrow, finalize custody documentation. A notification sound cuts through the silence. A new email from Preston, audio recording device delivered to your other location. Remember, we need clear evidence of threatening behavior. Provoke if necessary. The child's testimony is crucial. The rage that fills me is so pure, so complete, that for a moment I can't breathe. They plan to use my son, to manipulate and traumatize him, for money. I shut down the laptop just as headlights sweep across the driveway. Veronica is home. I greet her with a smile that feels like broken glass cutting my face. How was book club, darling? I ask, knowing it's the last normal conversation we'll ever have. Enlightening, she answers, kissing my cheek. We're reading about second chances. If she only knew how few she had left. The business card in my hand reads, Samuel Bennett, family law specialist, in embossed navy letters. The man across the desk studies me with shrewd eyes that have witnessed every variety of marital disaster. Let me understand this correctly, Samuel says, leaning forward. You believe your wife married you with the express purpose of fabricating abuse allegations to gain custody of your son and a substantial financial settlement? I don't believe it. I have proof. I slide a USB drive across his polished desk. Hidden camera footage of her verbally abusing my son when I'm not home. Emails outlining their entire plan. Background checks confirming she's done this before. Samuel picks up the drive, his expression grave. This is unusually thorough. I build skyscrapers, Mr. Bennett. Nothing goes up without a solid foundation and precise planning. My voice sounds calmer than I feel. Inside, I'm a maelstrom of rage and fear. I need the same approach here. What do we do? Cautious but decisive action, he replies after a thoughtful pause. We need irrefutable evidence before she realizes you know. Once she understands her cover is blown, she'll accelerate her plans. She's already preparing to manufacture abuse evidence. I don't have much time. Samuel nods. Then we build a fortress around your son and your assets. Today. Over the next week, I become someone I barely recognize, calculating, vigilant, recording every interaction. I install additional cameras, audio devices in every room. I start documenting every moment with Dylan, creating an unbreakable alibi against future accusations. Thomas secures our company's financial systems, changing access codes and implementing emergency protocols. My sister Audrey stands ready to take Dylan if things escalate suddenly. Through the cameras, I witness Veronica's preparations. She starts leaving bruises on her own arms, taking photos from specific angles. In the bathroom mirror, she practices crying, perfecting the trembling voice that will claim abuse. I can't bear it anymore, she rehearses, tears flowing on command. He seemed so perfect at first, but when we were alone, he changed. The irony of her words, a perfect description of herself, would be laughable if it weren't so monstrous. The most damning footage shows her coaching Dylan, kneeling before him with a frightening intensity in her eyes. Remember what I told you to say if anyone asks? About Daddy yelling and slamming doors. Dylan looks at the floor, his small shoulders hunched. But Daddy doesn't yell. Her fingers tighten on his shoulders. This is a game we're playing, remember? A special secret game. If you don't play properly, they'll take you away from both of us. Is that what you want? When Dylan begins having nightmares every night, I make my move. Hey buddy, I say casually over breakfast, Veronica listening nearby. How would you like to spend the weekend at Aunt Audrey's? She's taking the twins to that dinosaur park you love. His eyes light up for the first time in weeks. Really? Can I? Of course, I answer, watching Veronica from my peripheral vision. Her face remains pleasant, but her knuckles whiten around her coffee mug. I've already packed your bag. Aunt Audrey will pick you up from school today. The moment Dylan leaves for school, Veronica's mask slips. You didn't discuss this with me first, she says, voice dangerously quiet. I'm his mother now. I should have a say in these decisions. It was last minute, I lie smoothly. Audrey called this morning with the tickets. Call her back. Tell her he can't go. I raise an eyebrow. Why would I disappoint him like that? Because I said so. The venom in her voice is startling in its nakedness. Where is he really going, Robert? What are you planning? He's going to see dinosaurs with his cousins. I maintain a puzzled expression. Why would you think otherwise? Throughout the day, Veronica calls me repeatedly, her panic growing when she discovers Dylan indeed left school with Audrey. By evening, she's frantic. Where is my son? She demands when I return home. Our son is with my sister, exactly where I said he'd be. I set down my briefcase, watching her carefully. Veronica, what's really going on? The lie comes quickly. I'm worried about him. He's been having nightmares. He needs stability. That's funny, I say, maintaining a casual tone. I was just researching childhood anxiety this morning. Did you know trauma from emotional abuse can cause nightmares and bedwetting in children? Her eyes narrow almost imperceptibly. What are you implying? Nothing at all. I head toward the kitchen. Just concerned about his well-being. Like any father would be. Later that night, I overhear her urgent phone conversation from the bathroom. He knows something. The boy is gone. No, I don't know where. We need to move faster. Prepare the emergency documents. I'll make the recordings this week. I text Samuel. She's accelerating the timeline. Be ready. His response is immediate. All preparations in place. Hold steady. The next morning, I receive an unexpected call from Michael Reyes. I found Beverly Walsh, he says without preamble. Preston's ex-wife. She's willing to talk. About what? About Operation Phoenix, Michael replies. Their name for the scheme to destroy a man's life and rise from the ashes with his money. For the first time since discovering Veronica's betrayal, I feel the balance of power shifting. My voice is steel when I answer. Set the meeting. It's time to end this. Beverly Walsh meets me in a quiet corner of a hotel lobby bar, far from my usual haunts. She's elegant but tense, her eyes constantly scanning the room as if expecting Preston to materialize. Thank you for coming, I say as she slides into the booth. I should have done this years ago. Her voice is soft but resolute. They called it Operation Phoenix. Destroy a man's life and rise from the ashes with his money. How many times have they done this? That I know of. At least 7. Preston finds the targets, successful businessmen, preferably widowed or divorced, always with children, and Victoria does the rest. Beverly's hands tremble slightly around her untouched water glass. The child is always the key. Once they have leverage over the child, they have leverage over the father. How did you discover their scheme? I found their files. Detailed dossiers on potential targets, scripts for Victoria to follow, psychological assessments to exploit vulnerabilities. Her eyes meet mine. Preston was careless. He thought I was too medicated to notice. Medicated. Antidepressants. After months of gaslighting and manipulation, I believed I was losing my mind. Beverly's smile is bitter. When I confronted him, he filed for divorce, claiming I was mentally unstable and a danger to myself. I absorbed this information, recognizing the same tactics used against Veronica's previous husbands. What happened? I lost everything except the evidence I managed to hide. It wasn't enough then, but combined with what you have now. She pushes a flash drive across the table. This might finally end their operation. The next morning, I wake to a barrage of notifications on my phone. Anonymous posts on social media platforms accusing me of financial misconduct, mistreatment of subcontractors, and veiled references to private behavior that would shock the community. Thomas calls before I've finished my first coffee. We've got problems, he says without preamble. 3 subcontractors for Millennium Plaza received anonymous emails claiming we're facing bankruptcy. They're threatening to pull out unless we provide additional financial guarantees. How did this happen? Someone's waging a coordinated smear campaign. The emails trace back to public internet access points, nothing trackable. I don't need to ask who's behind it. Veronica's new strategy is clear. If she can't win through the courts, she'll destroy my reputation and business. By noon, I receive a text from an unknown number. You destroyed the wrong woman. I will take everything you hold dear. I forward it to Michael and Samuel, adding it to our growing evidence pile. My phone rings again. Dylan's school. Mr. Mercer, there was an incident today, the principal says, her voice tight with concern. A man attempted to sign Dylan out of school, claiming to be your brother-in-law sent by your wife. My blood turns to ice. I don't have a brother-in-law. We're aware. Our security protocols prevented the removal, and the man left when questioned. We've already contacted the police. I'm coming right now. At the school, the security footage shows a man I don't recognize, professional, well-dressed, unmemorable. The type you'd hire for discreet work. He had paperwork, the receptionist explains. It looked official, but something felt off. When I called your emergency contact to verify, he walked out. I thank the school for their vigilance and take Dylan to my office, unwilling to let him out of my sight. Michael meets us there, reviewing the security footage. Hired professional, he confirms. Likely an associate of Preston's. This escalation suggests they're getting desperate. That afternoon, Lucia Martinez, an investigative journalist Thomas knows, arrives at my office. She listens intently as I share a carefully edited version of events, omitting details that might harm Dylan. A serial marriage con artist targeting vulnerable businessmen? Lucia's eyes light with professional interest. With evidence of previous victims? This is substantial. But dangerous, I caution. These people have resources and no moral boundaries. The best stories always are. She tucks away her recorder. I'll need to verify independently, speak to other victims if possible. Most are too frightened or ashamed to come forward. Let me worry about that. Lucia stands to leave. This kind of predatory behavior thrives in shadows. It's time to shine some light. 3 days later, 2 more investors withdraw from the Millennium Plaza project, citing uncertainty about Mercer contracting stability. The bank calls about concerning information they've received regarding my financials. Then the rumors turn darker, more personal. Veronica launches the ultimate attack, whispering to mutual acquaintances that I was somehow responsible for Lena's death during childbirth. That I pushed her to maintain her career through a difficult pregnancy. That her death wasn't the tragic complication it appeared to be. The accusation is so monstrous, so contrary to the 5 years of visible grief I've carried, that it backfires spectacularly. Friends who had begun to distance themselves amid the financial rumors rally around me, outraged that anyone would weaponize Lena's memory. The community's protection becomes a wall against Veronica's poison, especially when my sister encounters her at the local supermarket. I'm reviewing security protocols for Dylan's school when Audrey calls, her voice vibrating with rarely seen fury. I just publicly eviscerated your soon-to-be ex in the produce section, she announces. She had the audacity to approach me, to try her manipulative tactics on me. What happened? I asked, rather loudly, how she could desecrate the memory of a woman who died bringing her child into the world. I believe the entire store heard me. For the first time in weeks, I laugh, a genuine release of tension. I wish I'd seen it. Oh, someone recorded it, Audrey replies with grim satisfaction. It's already making the rounds. Her mask slipped, Robert. Everyone saw the real Veronica. As Veronica's public facade crumbles, I receive word from Samuel. Our court date for emergency custody proceedings has been set. The endgame has begun. The family court building stands imposing against the morning sky, its cold stone facade revealing nothing of the human dramas unfolding within. Dylan sits beside me in the waiting area, his small hand clutching mine. Is the fairy teacher in trouble? He asks, his voice small. I've explained the situation in terms he can understand, that Veronica did some bad things, that we're here to make sure she can't hurt him anymore. But children seek simple narratives, heroes and villains, fairy tales with clear morals. Yes, buddy. She did some bad things and lied to a lot of people. Like when she told me you didn't love me. His directness takes my breath away. Exactly like that. I squeeze his hand gently. And that was the biggest lie of all. Dr. Emma Chen approaches, kneeling to Dylan's eye level. Ready for our talk with the judge? Remember, just like we practiced, tell the truth about what you remember. That's all. Dylan nods solemnly. And then I don't have to see her again. That's what we're working toward, Emma assures him. Samuel Bennett appears at the corridor entrance, impeccable in a charcoal suit. Judge Williams will see us now. She's agreed to interview Dylan in chambers rather than the open courtroom. Relief washes through me. Judge Diana Williams has a reputation for fairness and particular sensitivity to children caught in custody battles. Her private chambers will be less intimidating than the formal courtroom. Dr. Chen will accompany him, Samuel explains. As both his therapist and a court-appointed evaluator, she can ensure the questioning remains appropriate. I kneel before Dylan. I'll be right outside. Just tell Judge Williams the truth, okay? You're not in trouble, and nothing that happened was your fault. He nods bravely, though fear lingers in his eyes. As Emma leads him toward the judge's chambers, I catch sight of Veronica and her attorney entering the courthouse. Veronica has transformed herself yet again. Modest clothing, minimal makeup, the perfect picture of a concerned mother. Her attorney, Leona Parker, is known for aggressive tactics in high-conflict divorces. Samuel places a steadying hand on my shoulder. Remember, let me do the talking. No matter what she says or does, maintain your composure. The preliminary hearing begins with Leona presenting their case, a masterfully constructed narrative painting Veronica as a devoted stepmother who discovered disturbing behavior from her new husband. "My client hesitated to come forward out of fear," Leona tells Judge Williams. "Mr. Mercer's financial resources and community standing made her concerns seem futile. But her priority has always been the child's safety." When Veronica takes the stand, her performance is flawless, voice trembling at appropriate moments, tears precisely timed, details vague enough to avoid specific refutation. "I tried to be the mother he needed," she says, dabbing her eyes. But behind closed doors, Robert became controlling, volatile. Dylan started wetting the bed, having nightmares. When I suggested therapy, Robert refused. Judge Williams observes with an unreadable expression. "Mrs. Mercer, do you have documentation of these incidents?" "I feared using my phone to record would escalate the situation," Veronica replies smoothly. "But I kept a journal." She gestures to a leather-bound notebook her attorney presents to the court. When it's our turn, Samuel methodically dismantles their narrative. First, he presents Dylan's actual therapy records, showing sessions began at my initiative, not Veronica's objection. Then comes the technical expert who verifies the authenticity of our recordings, both audio and video, and confirms they haven't been manipulated or edited. "Your Honor, rather than describe what these recordings contain, we believe they speak for themselves," Samuel says, requesting permission to play them. As the first recording begins, Veronica berating Dylan, telling him his mother didn't want him, the blood drains from her face. By the third recording, where she rehearses her abuse claims in the bathroom mirror, her attorney is frantically writing notes. "These are manipulated," Veronica interrupts, standing abruptly. "He edited these. He's trying to frame me." "Mrs. Mercer, please sit down," Judge Williams orders sharply. "You don't understand. He deserves to lose everything." Veronica's voice rises hysterically. "Men like him use women and discard them. They take what they want and leave nothing behind." The courtroom falls silent as her mask completely shatters. "All men are the same," she continues, her composure abandoned. "They deserve to suffer like we've suffered." Judge Williams bangs her gavel. "Mrs. Mercer, control yourself or you'll be held in contempt." Leona tugs desperately at Veronica's sleeve, trying to quiet her, but the damage is done. The calculated victim has revealed herself as the vengeful perpetrator. After a brief recess, Judge Williams delivers her interim ruling, temporary full custody to me, with Veronica prohibited from any contact with Dylan pending full psychological evaluation. Court-appointed supervisors will oversee the Millennium Plaza project finances to prevent interference until final divorce proceedings. Outside the courthouse, Veronica waits by my car, her face a mixture of fury and desperation. "This isn't over, Robert," she says, her voice low. "We still have options." "It's over, Veronica. Or should I call you Victoria?" Her eyes widen slightly, confirmation I didn't need. "I can change," she whispers, suddenly shifting tactics. "I can be better. I just wanted to be loved." "No," I say firmly. "You wanted power and money. And you were willing to destroy an innocent child to get it." Something dangerous flashes across her face, the mask dropping completely. "You'll regret this," she hisses. "No one can protect you forever." From behind me, Thomas's voice calls out, "Got it all on video, Rob." Another lovely piece of evidence. Veronica's eyes dart between us before she turns and stalks away, her threats hanging in the air like storm clouds. The battle is won, but I sense the war is far from over. The anonymous call comes at 3 a.m, jolting me from the first decent sleep I've had in weeks. Suspicious activity at the Millennium Plaza construction site, a mechanical voice reports before hanging up. I immediately call Marcus, head of security. "Get a team there now." "I'm on my way." "Already ahead of you, sir," he answers, sounding wide awake despite the hour. Silent alarm triggered 15 minutes ago. Police are en route. When I arrive, the site is bathed in the red and blue lights of police cruisers. A small fire in the site office has been extinguished, but the acrid smell of accelerant lingers in the air. Marcus approaches, his expression grim. "We caught him in the act," he says, nodding toward a police car where a young man sits in the back seat. "Had enough gasoline to take down the whole office complex." Do we know who he is? Jason Briggs, former student of your wife's from her teaching days in Nevada. Has quite a record: petty theft, vandalism. Claims she paid him $5,000 to send a message. I exhale slowly, the near miss settling heavily on my shoulders. We need to update the restraining order. And double security at Dillon's school tomorrow. By morning, Lucia Martinez's exposé dominates the local news and is gaining traction nationally. Wedding con of the century: how Victoria Haynes manipulated the justice system. The article is comprehensive, detailing Veronica's history of predatory marriages, the involvement of Preston Walsh, and interviews with 2 previous victims who finally felt safe enough to speak publicly. Thomas calls with mixed news. The article is generating sympathy, and 2 investors have recommitted to Millennium Plaza. But Preston Walsh has gone underground. His accounts were emptied 3 days ago. And Veronica? Still in town, but she's claiming she's the victim, that Preston manipulated her, that she truly loved you and Dillon. I laugh bitterly. And the videos of her abusing my son? Was she manipulated into that too? She's desperate and cornered, Thomas replies. That makes her unpredictable. Be careful. That afternoon, Michael calls with unexpected news. Veronica's been hospitalized. Attempted suicide last night after the article was published. A complicated knot of emotions tangles in my chest. No love remains, but there is pity for someone so broken. Is she stable? Physically, yes. Her psychiatrist wants to speak with you, Dr. Alana Winters. Says it's important. I meet Dr. Winters in the hospital cafeteria that evening, away from Veronica's room. She's thoughtful and direct, choosing her words carefully within the bounds of patient confidentiality. Mrs. Mercer's condition is complex, she explains. While I can't discuss specifics, I can tell you we're dealing with antisocial personality disorder with significant narcissistic traits. This isn't simply greed or malice. It's a profound inability to experience empathy combined with an excessive need for admiration and status. Are you suggesting she's not responsible for her actions? I ask, tension creeping into my voice. Not at all. Mental health conditions explain behavior but don't excuse it. Dr. Winters meets my gaze steadily. I'm telling you this because understanding the nature of her disorder might help protect your son during his recovery. She hands me a card for a specialized child therapist. Children who've experienced this type of psychological manipulation often develop specific trauma responses. This colleague specializes in cases like Dillon's. I take the card, grateful for her candor. Will she recover? Veronica, I mean. With extensive therapy, individuals with these disorders can develop better coping mechanisms. But the fundamental patterns. She hesitates. They're deeply ingrained. The fact that she's cooperating with authorities against Preston Walsh is progress, but I'd advise caution regarding any future involvement with her. Dillon's recovery becomes my primary focus. The specialized therapist helps him process the confusion and betrayal in age-appropriate ways. Slowly, his nightmares decrease, though he still asks to sleep with his door open. Is new mom coming back? He asks one night as I tuck him in. No, buddy. She won't be coming back. Promise. I promise. I smooth his hair back from his forehead. No one will hurt you like that again. One weekend, I take Dillon to visit Lena's grave, something we've done regularly since her death, but which took on a painful dimension during Veronica's presence in our lives. Dillon places a drawing on the headstone, a family portrait of just the 2 of us, standing beside a house with a large sun overhead. Hi, real mom, he says softly. Daddy says you loved me a lot. I kneel beside him, my throat tight with emotion. She loved you more than anything in the world, Dillon. Never doubt that. As we walk back to the car, my phone rings, a number I don't recognize. Robert. This is George Thompson, Lena's father. My in-laws have barely spoken to me since Lena's death, their grief manifesting as blame. Hearing George's voice after so many years of strained silence catches me completely off guard. We saw the news reports, he continues when I fail to respond. Margaret and we want you to know we're sorry. For pulling away when you and the boy needed family most. His voice breaks slightly. Lena would be proud of how you protected her son. Those words, simple acknowledgement of what I fought so hard to do, break something open inside me. For the first time since discovering Veronica's betrayal, I allow myself to truly feel the depth of what we've survived. "Thank you," I manage. "That means more than you know." "We'd like to see him," George says tentatively. "Our grandson. If that's all right with you." Dylan skips ahead of me on the path, autumn leaves crunching beneath his sneakers. He looks back, impatient for me to catch up, his face alight with uncomplicated joy. "I think we'd both like that very much," I reply, watching my son emerge from shadows I feared would darken his childhood forever. 6 months after the preliminary hearing, I find myself back in a courtroom, this time in the county criminal court. The gallery is packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and, most importantly, other victims of Veronica and Preston's schemes. We sit united, a band of survivors watching justice unfold. Veronica enters in handcuffs, her prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame. Our eyes meet briefly, hers hollow now, stripped of the manipulative spark that once animated them. She quickly looks away, focusing instead on her attorney, who appears far less confident than during our family court battle. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Marcus Reynolds," the bailiff announces. The case has become something of a national sensation, a precedent-setting prosecution about the systematic abuse of family court procedures. Lucia's reporting uncovered 4 additional victims beyond those we initially identified, creating a pattern too significant for prosecutors to ignore. Preston Walsh, apprehended at the Mexican border with falsified documents and nearly $2 million in bearer bonds, occupies the second defendant's chair. His earlier bravado has evaporated, replaced by a desperate cooperation with authorities to reduce his potential sentence. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Elena Rodriguez, stands to deliver her opening statement. "Your Honor, the state will demonstrate that the defendants engaged in a systematic criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable families. This wasn't mere fraud, it was a calculated campaign of psychological warfare against children and parents for financial gain." Over the following days, testimony unfolds like chapters of a horror novel. Financial records reveal the elaborate money laundering operation. Psychological assessments document the trauma inflicted on children used as pawns. Email correspondence between Veronica and Preston maps out their methodical approach to destroying lives. The most damning testimony comes from Bradley Winters, Veronica's first husband, who lost his children, his business, and nearly his life to their scheme. "I believed her completely," he testifies, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes. "When she claimed I had become abusive during blackouts I couldn't remember, I actually questioned my own sanity. By the time I realized what was happening, the court had already awarded her custody and frozen my assets." Dylan's testimony, thankfully, is presented via recorded interview with Dr. Chen rather than requiring his presence in court. Watching the video of my son describing how "new mom got scary when daddy wasn't home" reignites a fury I've worked hard to contain. Veronica's defense strategy shifts repeatedly, first claiming she was Preston's unwitting pawn, then suggesting mental illness removed her culpability, finally attempting to paint herself as a victim of childhood trauma repeating learned patterns. The jury deliberates for less than 6 hours before returning with their verdict, guilty on all counts for both defendants. Judge Reynolds looks down at Veronica over his glasses as he delivers the sentence. "Mrs. Haynes, you have perpetrated one of the most disturbing forms of fraud this court has encountered. You didn't merely steal money. You stole trust. You broke families. You traumatized children who looked to you for protection." He pauses, his expression severe. "I sentence you to 15 years in state prison. Furthermore, you are permanently prohibited from having unsupervised contact with any minor, including upon your release." Preston receives 12 years for his role, reduced from a potential 20 due to his cooperation against other members of their network. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward me as the victims stand together on the steps. I've prepared for this moment, understanding that our story might prevent future tragedies. "Today isn't about vengeance," I begin, Dylan's hand secure in mine. "It's about accountability. True victims of domestic violence deserve to be heard and protected. Those who exploit the system designed to protect vulnerable families undermine legitimate victims' chances for justice." George Thompson, Lena's father and a retired judge himself, stands beside me, lending his considerable authority to the cause. "The legislation we're proposing, the Mercer Amendments, will strengthen penalties for fabricated abuse claims while maintaining essential protections for genuine victims. Later that evening, as Dylan sleeps peacefully for the first time without his nightlight, I sit in my office reviewing the paperwork for the newly established Mercer Foundation, dedicated to supporting children traumatized by manipulative custody battles. Beverly Walsh has agreed to serve as the foundation's director, her understanding of the victims' experiences making her uniquely qualified. Our working relationship has evolved into a tentative friendship over these challenging months. To new beginnings, she says, raising a coffee mug as we finalize the foundation's mission statement. To justice, I counter, touching my mug to hers. A text message from Thomas interrupts our modest celebration. Millennium Plaza financing fully restored. Construction resumes Monday. After months of legal battles, financial uncertainty, and personal trauma, my professional life is finally back on track as well. I forward the message to George, who played a crucial role in convincing investors to recommit to the project. For the first time in over a year, I feel the weight lifting, not gone completely, but bearable now, balanced by the promise of healing ahead. Justice doesn't erase the damage done, but it offers something almost as essential, the chance to rebuild on solid ground. 2 years after Veronica's sentencing, I stand on the observation deck of Millennium Plaza, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in hues of amber and gold. The completed complex rises around me, 38 stories of glass and steel that gleam in the fading light, the most successful project in Mercer Contracting's history. Impressive view, Beverly says, joining me at the railing. Worth every battle it took to get here. I nod, allowing myself a moment of professional pride. The commercial spaces are already fully leased. The residential units are at 70% occupancy. We're ahead of projections. Always the businessman, she teases, her shoulder lightly brushing mine. I was talking about the sunset. I smile, acknowledging the gentle correction. Learning to appreciate moments rather than achievements has been part of my own healing process, one Beverly has patiently guided when I faltered. Our relationship evolved slowly, cautiously. We both carried too many scars to rush into anything, and we each had solid reasons to distrust romantic entanglements. What began as a professional collaboration through the foundation gradually grew into friendship, then something more, undefined but undeniably important. Dad. Beverly. Come see. Dylan's excited voice calls from across the deck where he's peering through mounted binoculars. At 9 years old, he's nearly unrecognizable from the frightened child who once hid in closets. Therapy, time, and security have worked their magic, transforming him into a confident, curious boy with Lena's quick mind and infectious laugh. We join him at the binoculars, taking turns looking where he points, a peregrine falcon's nest on a neighboring building. Mrs. Jenkins says they're the fastest animals on the planet, he informs us, eyes bright with excitement. They can dive at 200 miles per hour. That's faster than your car, Dad. Much faster, I agree, ruffling his hair. Ready for dinner? We're celebrating your science fair win, after all. His ecological building design, inspired by my work but taken in directions I never considered, won first prize at the regional competition. The model sits proudly displayed in my office, its innovative features already influencing elements of our newest projects. As we walk toward the elevator, Dylan surprises me by taking Beverly's hand along with mine. The gesture is small but significant, his acceptance of her presence in our lives offered freely, without pressure. Beverly's eyes meet mine over Dylan's head, a quiet acknowledgement passing between us. We've been careful never to push him, allowing him to set the pace for this new family configuration. She's never tried to replace Lena, a wisdom that made it possible for Dylan to welcome her without feeling disloyal to the mother he never knew. Later that evening, as we're leaving the restaurant, Dylan introduces Beverly to a schoolmate we encounter as an important person to us, a phrase that makes her eyes shine with unshed tears. After Dylan's asleep, I show Beverly the letter that arrived that morning, postmarked from the Women's Correctional Facility. She writes every 6 months, I explain. This is the first one that feels different. Beverly reads it silently, her expression thoughtful. Robert, I know my words mean little after what I've done, but after 3 years of therapy and reflection, I need to say this. I understand now the pain I caused. To you, to Dylan, to the others. I can never make amends adequate to the harm, but you should know I recognize the suffering I created. I don't ask forgiveness. Some actions lie beyond that grace. But perhaps knowing that I've finally confronted the broken parts of myself might offer some small closure. Victoria, what do you think? I ask when she finishes. Her therapist believes it's genuine progress, Beverly says, handing the letter back. Acknowledging harm without seeking personal benefit is significant for someone with her diagnosis. Dr. Winters suggested accepting the apology might be part of my own healing, even if I never respond or have contact again. Beverly nods. Only you can decide if that's true for you. The following weekend, Dylan and I make our annual visit to Lena's grave, this time with flowers and the certificate from his science fair victory. Look, Mom, I won. Just like you used to, he says, placing the framed certificate against the headstone. Lena had been a champion debater in school, her trophies still displayed in my mother's home. I stand back, giving Dylan his moment with the mother he connects with through stories and photographs. For the first time in many years, I don't feel the crushing weight of guilt and broken promises. I kept the one that mattered most, keeping our son safe, loved, and thriving. As we walk back to the car, Dylan says something that stops me in my tracks. Next time, can Beverly come too? I think Mom would like to meet her. That evening, I call Beverly and extend Dylan's invitation, my voice rough with emotion as I relay his words. Are you sure you're ready for that? She asks gently. I think we all are. The next day, the three of us attend the grand opening of the new pediatric wing at City Hospital, funded by Mercer Contracting and built at cost. The dedication plaque reads, "In honor of Lena Thompson Mercer and all parents whose love continues to live in their children." As I watch Dylan proudly cut the ceremonial ribbon, Beverly's hand warm in mine, I realize that from the ashes of betrayal, something stronger has emerged, not despite our wounds, but because of how we chose to heal them. We cannot predict the trials life will bring. But we can decide how we respond, whether we allow bitterness to consume us or choose justice tempered with compassion. In that choice lies our true power. Dad, I'm proud of you, Dylan says, returning to my side. As I pull him close, I glance at the sky, feeling somewhere, somehow, Lena is smiling down, approving of our new beginning.